Venice, there are no roads, just canals and bridges that connect hundreds of small islands together. There is no subway. Instead, there are water buses that will take you around along the canals and will provide you with glorious views of the beautiful architecture. The streets, which are more like glorified sidewalks, are made of elegant gray stone and are lined with traditional restaurants and shops. Venice is unlike any city in Italy and maybe even the world, which is why Venetian food is not what is considered classic Italian food. Of course, Venetians still have pasta, but instead of spaghetti covered in bolognese, they serve it with cuttlefish and a black ink sauce. There is no pizza, but there is risotto, which is made with Italian rice, cheese, and whatever toppings you want. The food is as unique and special as the city. My stepdad of 10 years is from Padua, but his mother is from Venice. Therefore, the Italian food I grew up eating is Venetian through and through. Although my father's family is from Sicily, I have always felt like my Italian roots come from my stepdad, which means they come from Venice. My mom and my stepdad married when I was 7 years old. Although a lot changed when they got married, food stands out. No longer was my plate full of pork chops and carrots. Instead, I now ate risotto, grilled fish, and tons of tomatoes. Regular dishes became tomatoes with olive oil and basil, as well as things like octopus. To this day, every Thanksgiving we make homemade pumpkin ravioli. We make the stuffing and the dough, roll out the pasta, and individually pack the ravioli. Without my stepdad, we never would have made ravioli. Last summer, I was in Venice with my mom before my stepbrother's wedding. We were at a very traditional Venetian restaurant and decided to try cuttlefish and black ink sauce with polenta. After we ate, I told my mom how much I enjoyed the dish, and she told me that my stepdad liked it too. We then continued to discuss my stepdad's influence, specifically when it came to food, and my project was born. My stepdad grew up in Padua, which is about 25 miles west of Venice, but his mom grew up in Venice. So during my trip, I took a break from the canals and went to visit my step-grandmother, Renata. We went to lunch and then sat down and had a conversation about Renata growing up in Venice.
Breakfast, milk with coffee inside and some biscuit.
Cookies.
Stop. And 1 o'clock, pasta asciutta at 1 o'clock.
Pasta with tomatoes.
Pasta with tomatoes. Come si dice, roasted beef,
Yeah, roasted
and
veal.
potatoes. Every day I was
Stuck.
the evening, minestra in brodo, riso in brodo,
Rice with broth, with
and verdure,
and vegetables.
vegetables. A very good, nice person that was Tata, come si dice?
Nurse.
Nurse
Nurse.
of my mother when she was child. And she come at home of my mother and my father and she cooked. And she was very clever to cook. Because before they tell me study and after I should cook. And so I cooked, and the first month after wedding, my husband è cresciuto 6 kg. I cooked very few because I tried always to have a girl in the kitchen that cooked. But we cooked pasta asciutta and cotolette.
So, Renata's life has not been as full of food as mine and my stepdad's. In fact, a majority of my stepdad's culinary knowledge comes from him teaching himself. My dinner table has always been full of fish, unlike Renata, who ate veal every day. Although Renata's diet was not her favorite, it makes sense that they ate so much meat because not eating fish was a sign of wealth. Of course, the majority of the food served in Venice today is fish, because the old red meat recipes are viewed as archaic. The way I approached eating in Venice was more my stepdad's style. We went to traditional restaurants and ate traditionally Venetian food. Our first stop was Al Arco, which is known for cicchetti, which is basically like a Venetian amuse-bouche. It is often simply cured meat or fish on top of a little piece of bread. There are more heartier versions that are often fried. The 4 you see in front of you are stuffed fried zucchini blossoms, what can simply be described as tiny calzones, arancini with ham, and finally a fried crab. Our next memorable culinary experience was at Osteria Trefonti. We started with soft-shell crab and polenta. Polenta initially consisted of water and any sort of grain, but after Columbus brought corn to Europe and the Venetians were in search of a cheaper grain, corn became the main ingredient of polenta. For our main course, my sister had rigatoni with artichoke and jumbo shrimp, I had tagliatelle with spider crab, and my mom had John Dory. For dessert, we had hazelnut ice cream and pistachio cake. It was amazing. The next day, we went to Burano. Burano is famous for two things, lace and cookies called bussola. Bussola are classic Venetian cookies and one of my absolute favorite treats. My stepdad said that the only place to get authentic bussola is on Burano. Bussola were created by a local baker because the owner of a popular restaurant wanted something for his customers to dip into their sweet wine. Bussola were the solution because they absorb liquid without disintegrating. Bussola are not to be made at home. Back in the day, people either bought the cookies at the bakery, bought the ingredients and asked the baker to make them, or simply bought the dough and baked them at home. After Burano, we went to yet another island called Torcello, which is known for one thing, an amazing restaurant called Locanda Cipriani. The island itself is remote and full of so much nature that it was hard to even imagine that we were still in Venice. The nature did not stop with the restaurant. We sat in a beautiful garden full of flowers, grapevines, and beautiful trees. We also had an amazing view of the church on the island, which is the oldest church in Venice. The restaurant itself is simple, but still delicious. We started with stuffed zucchini blossoms, which were almost as good as the ones my mom made when we had zucchini plants in my backyard. Although all the food was amazing, one of the most memorable dishes I had during the whole trip was gnocchi with asparagus. Although eating out was amazing, we decided to pay a visit to the famous Rialto Market, where all the restaurants got their ingredients, to get something for us to cook ourselves. The market itself was not only full of fresh produce, it also had some unique Italian characteristics, like harvested artichoke hearts. The most impressive part of the market was the fish. Not only were there whitefish, salmon, and tuna, there was also crabs, cuttlefish, and octopus. After we gawked at all the options, we finally decided on a simple menu my stepdad would have approved of: octopus with arugula and sautéed artichoke hearts.
Did you stand there all alone? Oh, I cannot explain what's going down. I can see you standing next to me, in and out, somewhere else right now. You sigh, look away. I can see it clear as day. Close your eyes, so afraid. Hide behind that baby face. Do 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 do. You can drive all night, looking for the answers in the pouring rain.
It was delicious. The last notable restaurant we went to was Vinita Gigio. This restaurant is one of my stepdad's favorites. He claims it's because the food is good, which it is, but I also think it's because his nickname is Gigio. My sister had cuttlefish with polenta, which is a classic Venetian dish, but of course, due to the fact that the sauce is black, the waiters always make sure the sauce is okay with the customer, so they're not alarmed. My mom and I had risotto with seafood. Risotto is a step up from what Renata had for dinner when she was a child. As you may recall, she had rice with broth and vegetables, which is known as minestra. Minestra is viewed as too simplistic, so restaurants serve risotto, which is rice that has completely absorbed the liquid. Not only was the meal delicious, it made sense to end our culinary experience at a restaurant with the same name as the man who inspired the project. Although Venice will never lose its beautiful canals and colorful old buildings, the large amount of tourists that flood into Venice are making it hard for Venetians to live there. Therefore, Venice may lose its culture.
Bad tourists, very maleducati, così. And so to see the center of Venice full of
Unpolite people.
it is very sad for me. Also in the shop, they put always the mask with a big nose, you know? Like always this mask. It is impossible.
Not only are there dozens of stores selling what looks like masks and glass necklaces that were made in China, the restaurants cater toward tourists by selling food like pizza and lasagna, which are not even remotely Venetian. I fear that the Venice that Renata grew up in is almost completely gone.
To know by side every person, because we are used that at this hour this go at home, at this hour she want to go there, and so every people about we know.
Although tourism seems to be taking over Venice, we were able to find a few gems that are authentically Venetian that my stepdad would have approved of. I would like to thank my mom for taking me to Venice, my sister for being patient while I took videos and photos of all of the food we ate, Renata for letting me interview her, Donatella, whose voice you heard helped translate Renata's answers, and of course my stepdad for introducing me to Venetian food and culture.